Doug referred to, the law clerks and the externs, the courtroom deputies and whatnot. The answer to the question relates directly to subject matter jurisdiction and what kind of a case can be brought in federal courts. There are a couple of things about federal subject matter jurisdiction that are critical. One is that you cannot stipulate to it. You've either got it or you don't. Similarly, you can't ever be deemed to have waived your right to challenge it. In other words, you can never be said to have waived your right to say there is no subject matter jurisdiction and this case has no business being in the federal courts. In fact, it can be challenged at any time, and in fact, there are cases where if there is not subject matter jurisdiction, it can be brought up for the first time on appeal and the case dismissed. So it's critical to understand what subject matter jurisdiction is and to know that you have it from the outset. It has got to be demonstrated on the face of the complaint. In other words, the allegations of the complaint itself have to make it absolutely clear that you have subject matter jurisdiction in the federal courts. And in fact, in the Northern District, the local rules here require in the complaint you have a separate paragraph with a heading jurisdiction that explains exactly why it is that you think this case is subject to federal subject matter jurisdiction. So how do we find out what it is? Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I can remember in law school taking a federal courts class and we were still looking and reading about and talking about federal subject matter jurisdiction up into the page 1,000 and something. There are volumes and volumes written about federal subject matter jurisdiction, what it is, what it isn't, and all of the ins and outs of it. Right now I'm going to give you the two major treatises for federal civil procedure. They're both critical books and they will help you in this area as well as others. One is Wright, Miller, and Cooper, Federal Practice and Procedure. It's a West's book. It's an extremely valuable multi-volume treatise. The other is Moore's Federal Practice. That's published by Matthew Bender. And both of these treatises have multiple volumes on the subject that we're going to be discussing now, and we are going to cover it very briefly and get on to some of the real nuts and bolts procedural issues that relate to a case that's actually in federal court. But you should know that there really are three kinds of federal subject matter jurisdiction if we look at it very quickly. The first is federal question jurisdiction. That is cases that arise under the United States Constitution or federal statutes or federal regulations. You can generally find these kinds of cases in the Judicial Code, that is Title 28 of the United States Code, sections 1330 through 1361. And there in those sections are a variety of different kinds of federal claims, federal causes of action, and federal cases that can be brought. Everything from constitutional claims to admiralty claims to copyright, patent claims, to the ways actions against the United States should be brought, to antitrust claims. Now, in addition to those statutory sections, there are certain separate federal statutes that in themselves have federal jurisdiction provisions, such as the Securities Acts, various labor statutes, and my suggestion to you, rather than trying to deal with all of this either in multi-volumes of treatises in your old law school textbook or in courses such as this, is if you have any question about whether you have got a federal claim from the transaction or issue that you're involved in, that you do exactly what a lot of us do, is seek the advice of a specialist. If you have something that looks like admiralty, find an admiralty lawyer. Most of the other issues in this course and in federal court generally, you don't really need to be consulting with someone who has tremendous federal court experience. This may be and is, in fact, in my opinion, one of the exceptions. But there is this federal question jurisdiction, and it is the major way, or at least one of the two major ways that you can obtain federal jurisdiction and take a case to federal court. The other, I'm sure you're aware, is diversity jurisdiction. Actions between citizens of different states, or citizens of a state and citizens of a foreign state or foreign countries themselves. You should know that for diversity jurisdiction, there's a jurisdictional limitation of $10,000.